Hi guys, as you look at images of the scarf, I wanted to mention a few things. First, this is by no means a polished video. It originally was going to be a password-only vid to support sales of our warp bundles, but I was encouraged to make it public. I've been weaving for over 37 years, but I am by no means a professional weaver, so please overlook any terminology glitches, as well as my being at a loss for the proper word or phrase far too often. I also need to let you know I've tweaked a few things in the bundles for sale, one being the placement of the ties. Hopefully this won't throw anybody off. The main process remains the same. You'll notice a lot of the video is spent smoothing out warp ends. I chose extreme types of yarn for this test warp so that I would know where my parameters were before creating bundles for sale. A few tangles ensued. Yours won't be this intense, but if tangles freak you out, you could maybe try warping stripes of each yarn type instead, or perhaps even use these yarns as weft and go ahead and warp your loom per usual. If you warp your loom as the video plays, the boring parts where we detangle and wind on in inchworm fashion won't seem so tedious. You can always use the fast speed option to sail through these parts as well. This is by no means a beginner tutorial on how to warp a loom. Some familiarity with the process is expected with this. I do offer an occasional tip, but it's not a weaving tutorial as such. We simply wanted to show rigid heddle weavers how we warp using a cut end bundle of yarns instead. Future videos will be coming not only on other ways of warping with these bundles, but we've also got some ideas for some other kind of bundles that don't even resemble these. If you guys have any questions, be sure to email us, run over to the website and shoot us an email there from the form. I hope that all of your weaving endeavors are going to be really positive ones. Thanks. Okay, when you get your chain, you're going to notice on this end, one end, you've got each of the different threads, each of the different yarns tied in belts with a knot. On the other end, they're tied with a bow. Do not start with the end that has knots on it. Do not use that. We're going to try to undo the chain from the end with the bow. And just hold these all like they were one great big warp. Do not worry about any individuality in them. Just go ahead and try to carefully undo the chain. It should be loose enough for you to be able to do that. And you're going to continue taking it apart only until you get to this point where you have a black and white cord, black and white string going around the entire group of warp ends. This is the part you're going to be worrying about right now. Everything else, just lay on your table if you've got a table set up. Leave it on the front of your loom. And then you're going to need a approximately 24-inch piece of cording. Make sure it's something that can take tension without snapping on you. 24, 22, 30. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of separate this into two, and you don't need to worry about having certain ones on certain sides. You're just going to kind of separate it into two, and you're going to pass this cord through it. And you're going to pass it through it on your side of that tie. So you've got the tie and half of your cords on one side and half your cords on the other side. What you're going to do is you're going to use, now on my Kromsky I can use this, the bottom bar here. If you're working with an Ashford or a Cricket, you can even tie it onto the front beam if you want to. But what you need to do is to take each of these ends and go around the bar, but go from back to front on both sides. So we're going to go back to front. So now you've got both of your ends coming up on the front side of your bar, and we're just going to tie this like you were tying a shoe. Just tie it pretty secure. This is just going to temporarily hang on to your warp chain for you, so it's not going to go anywhere. You will now notice that there are groups of threads. Yours is going to be different. Every one of these is a different combination of yarns. Each of these is tied in two places. You've got it tied here with a bow, and you've got it tied on the very end with a bow. Each of these can be treated as its own separate artistic statement. You can either, like if I wanted to go with the white and make a white section here, I could make a white section and I could just slay the reed with just my white in both the holes and the slots. If I want to evenly disperse this, then I start at one end and I can work to the other end, and I can move every 2 inches or every 3 inches. If you want to just be random, you can go ahead and just put them in random. I would suggest that you use one type of yarn at a time. That's why they're all separately tied. That way you're not going to get a big tangled mess. So choose the thread that you want to work with. I will work with, I'll work with this one because this one will be easy for you to see. And the other ones, just lay in front. Keep them, don't let them hang off because they're going to get tangled in what you're doing. So just lay them in the front and go ahead and untie this. You might need a tapestry needle, embroidery hook, something to be able to untie this because they were tied pretty tight so that they didn't slip. I'll go ahead and use my sleigh hook here to help me. And the one on the end, the bow on the end, you also need to do the same thing with, but that you can always cut off if you want to. These ends are not perfectly straight, so if you would prefer to just snip this off like right here, then you don't need to worry about untying this one. It shouldn't be that difficult. Okay, so now I have these yarns, and this is the bout, and you're going to notice that in yours you will also have one of these where you've got two ends of several different kinds of accent yarns. Most of the other ones have, well, all of the other ones have the same yarn but different amounts of ends to that bout. This I want to be able to separate out. I have two that are the same, and I will have two that are the same. So if I want to evenly spread these out and have like a yellow one on this side of center and a yellow one on this side of center, then that I need to just go ahead and do that now and decide what I want to do. And knowing that you've got about 80 ends, we're working on a 10 dent reed. You can do this on an 8, you can do this on a 12. You'll just have a different, you'll probably have some extra threads left over. But go ahead and start up here, and you can start with a dent, or you can start with an eye. And this is where it's going to be kind of different than what you're used to doing, because you need to go slay all your dents, and you need to slay all the eyes at the same time. You cannot just do just the dents alone and then pull it through like you're used to doing with your with the typical rigid heddle. These eyes are going to be kind of tricky, so just be patient. If you have a setup where you can tie your reed up more forward toward you, like on a table, you can do that. You don't need to have it on a, clear away from you in position, locked in position. Now let's say I want those two here, and if I want to take this one and I want to put it down here, I can do that. I can work however I want to. I don't have to work from left to right or right to left or center out. I can spread these out however I want to spread these out. And once this one's done, pretending that's done, I can pick up the next group and untie both of these again, and I can go ahead and put those on top. and each one you do, just leave the ends hanging out, because what we're going to do eventually is we're going to tie these ends onto your back tie rod, just like you typically were used to doing with your front. We're going to tie these on here, and then we're going to roll those on. You can use your paper, you can use your wood strips, you can use your cardboard, whatever you're used to using in between each of the different revolutions. We're going to do that all the way around the back beam until we have about this much in the front, and then we'll go ahead and tie that on here like typical. And those will come in later videos, but for right now I just need to be able to take some time, figure out where do I want to put my threads and get all of the reed dented. We will go ahead and show you as I do that. I'll show you the progression in photos. Now that you've got all of your ends through the reed and you've double checked and made sure that everything is where it's supposed to be and that you're happy with how you've got it slayed, we're going to tie this now onto the back tie rod. This is where you usually have in typical rigid heddle fashion, this is where your loops would have gone, but now we're going to be tying on to this. I'm leaving a lot of mine on here because of fringe. If you would rather not have that much, then you're going to have to retie up front, move your threads forward, and do the same kind of thing we did with lashing it on to the front. So what you need to do here is to grab some of your ends, split them into two, and some of you are going to be very familiar with this, and we're going to do an overhand knot. The first half of an overhand. Now we're going to leave that go, and we're going to go down to the ends, and we're going to do the same thing down to the ends. And you don't need to pull really tight. Don't pull uber tight. Right now all we're doing is just getting these things tied on. Go down to this end. And it doesn't matter how many you take. You know, you can take 4 or 6. It's not going to matter. And you will notice that my reed is a 2.5 dent. Most of these are meant, most of the warps that I'm selling are meant for a 5 dent or a 10 dent reed. So some of my yarns I have doubled up, like this one. I've put 2 in here because I had a lot of ends per inch to get into here. Now you need to come up to the middle, and we'll go on this side. So you put your warp ends around the top, both sides of these. Come around the side, and then we're just going to tie the first half of a knot. Then I'm going to go to this one. And I'm taking about 4 on mine. Again, it's not really going to matter whether it's an even or odd amount. Okay, so this goes over, and we pick it up underneath, so that gets picked up underneath. We go over, it gets picked up underneath, and we're going to pull and do the first part of a knot there. And I'm just going to continue doing this all the way up and down until I get everybody tied on at first. Then we're going to go back through and double check to make sure we've got even tension. And you're always going to have the center will start losing tension. It already is. And then we're just going to go down and retighten everything up. And I can show you that here in a second because we're almost done. And again, if you don't want this much fringe, I'm just going to do a loose shawl. So a fringe is something that I'm going to want to do. But if you don't want to, just move the warp down. You're not going to be able to tie this on with just a little bit. Like, you cannot do this. I'll show you what you cannot do. This is not going to work. So don't try to feed this back here and put just a few inches under and try to tie this knot here with just a few inches, because you'll never get the tension right. If you're going to do that, if you need to do that, then you're going to have to adjust it down on the side where we tied on, where we lashed on the warp. Okay, now you can press lightly on here and you will see the difference. Like here it's very loose, here it's pretty tight. We go loose again. So what you need to do is just start in the center, tighten up, and work your way down and out. Then once you get things pretty well to where you think that they're pretty well even, then if you're going to do this, if you're going to tie it like you would a square knot, it's going to be really hard to get that open for your fringe. So since you've got so much left here, tie it and pull the loop through and just let the loop hang. And from here, you're going to be basically doing what you were used to doing before. You're going to be using, I don't know if you have leaf sticks that you're going to be using, if you're going to have cardboard, if you're just using paper. On the rigid heddle loom, since there's really not that much clearance, I'm just using paper because I can fit a longer warp on as I turn it around. But you guys use whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, that's it for this stage. We'll go back to that side next. Okay, now we're back onto this side, to our side of the reed, and you've got this warp chain, and you now can untie your cording that you use to lash this on. And these are going to lose tension. Don't worry about it. We're okay. Okay, now under here is that tie that I was mentioning to you. And this is on here without a locked knot on it. You should be able to just do what I just did and undo it. You shouldn't have to go at it with scissors because you're going to take the chance of cutting a warp thread. So now what you see is it looks like a jumbled mess. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. Just treat it like it was, your daughter, granddaughter hair, niece's hair. We're just going to kind of loosen these up. You don't need to pull this way. We're just trying to kind of loosen them up. Each of these was, each of the different kinds of threads was put in here as its own separate bout. So they will start to work themselves free if you just be patient. If you're working on a 5 dent, and you're working on with art yarn, you're not going to have so many threads going across as what I've got, so it's not going to look quite as jumbled. Don't pull this way again, just tease out. And all I care about is straightening it up to this point. I don't need to go, don't start pulling a yarn and try to get it all the way out of the crochet chain. We don't want to do that. I just am interested in from here to here, trying to get it straight. Okay, and once you've got this pretty well straight, then we're going to start advancing. We're going to start advancing the warp. I don't know how your loom works. It may be slightly different than what the Krumski is. Just let it go on. Don't worry about pulling tightness right now. Let it go on until it gets to a point where you'd start feeding your paper on. And we will take care of that in a minute. Right now, since we've advanced the warp that far, we're back to having this tangled. So now I'm letting out one loop from my crochet chain, and I've just got the rest of it sitting on my lap. When you get to your other ties, go ahead and get those off. This was not tied tight, it was tied loose. So you can go ahead and cut this without worrying about cutting a thread. And again, we're just going to let it drop, try to straighten it out. Just the one major thing that you've got to remember is not to panic and not to think that this is all too far ahead or too jumbled or too messy, because you're just fine as long as you just keep your cool and just gently tease it out. Depending on your threads, you might have some that are a little snaggy. You might have some that are gonna, like if you've got some silk in yours, it's just gonna slide right open. So you may not have what I have here. I have a lot of this kind of thing with little worms on it, so they kind of tend to be grabby. Okay, now I'm going to stop the video for a second and go around, and I'm gonna advance my warp a little bit with my paper. And I'm just going to keep doing this, inchworming my way down. I advance a little bit, I tease out. I advance a little bit, I tease out. And as long as you keep fairly decent, consistent tension, whether it's loose or not loose, you should be fine. When you have a couple revolutions on the back, you can take these and kind of pull them down to be able to get a little bit of tension on there. And make sure that it's nice and tight in the back. I'm not going to do that really hard right now because I don't have my paper back there. So I'll catch you in just a little bit. I've got one revolution on my paper. I just put my paper here, and it's about here on the other side. And all I've done is just, slowly moved it back. I know I'm going to start getting tangled down here, so now I'm going to go around to the side. And I'm going to just do what we did before. Just work it, kind of teasing them out. Finding where you've got like this big section here. You probably won't ever have that. This is going to be a little problematic for me because I've got two threads going in the same dent space because of how thin these were and working with a 2.5. Okay, I've now put the paper in, and we're back like at one revolution around, and I'm back on this side now, straightening this out. Do not undo all of the chain. I still have I still am tidy here. You don't need to just do it one little chain loop at a time, and just work very patiently with your different bouts. And once you get it down to about here, you can go ahead and crank on, advance your warp till you get to this, and then come back down here and straighten out some more. And we're just going to inchworm our way up. Don't yank on it really hard. Okay, now after a couple revolutions, you can go ahead and kind of tug these just to kind of lock them in up there. And not really hard, just, you know, just give them a nice little tug. And then we'll go back to straightening. And again, you're going to be tempted to like take this one and pull out. Don't do that. When you get down to this part, you're going to notice a bunch of the little ties again. And that's where you get your scissors. And these will be loose, so you can cut them without worrying. You've got one more tie here. That'll kind of hold things together. So once you get down to that point, we'll be able to untie that or clip it, and you can work on each of these individual thread types by themselves. Just continue to be patient, because by now you're getting almost there. Okay, now you can completely take this apart if you want to, if your chain can be completely removed, separated out. This tie down here is a tie, but again, there's enough space in here so you can cut it without worrying about it. If you do have one type of thread that seems to be problematic, I'd say if I wanted to, I could pull the white one out. You don't need to worry about the ends coming out because the ends are tied in that one knot, remember. So if you'd like to be able to try to disassociate this from the rest of it, you can do that. Just make sure that you don't pull it out and bunch the rest of these up and make it worse, make them worse, because you've got some that have a lot of ends per inch, and then you've got others that just have a few. If you're going to pull, hold on to this down here so that you don't end up with a big knot down here. Okay, when you get to about 2 feet or so, we're going to go down and we're going to clip those knots that are down here. You can either choose to cut them off right above the knot. These are tied really tight. If you want to go ahead and chance cutting them, you know, go ahead. I don't know if you're going to be successful in getting them untied. You can try. And at this point, you should be able to separate them out all the way to the end. If you're sitting at a table doing this and you don't have a stand, you might want to go ahead and tease it open and advance it a little bit more, because it's a little easier for those of us that have a stand, because we can just let them hang. So you may need to do another couple repeats of winding on. And depending on what size of loom you have, you need to be cognizant of how much warp you need to be able to tie on to the front. And don't advance too much. If I wanted a whole bunch of fringe on this side, this would probably be about where I would stop. I'm going to go ahead and advance it one more time. Okay, so now I can go ahead and lash on. I don't know how you guys have, you know, whether you're tying on to a cable like I have here, or if you're just tying directly onto your rod. But you can go ahead and do that, and we do that exactly the same way that we did it in the back. If if you don't want a bunch of fringe, then go ahead and keep advancing until you get enough to be able to tie on. Just, it's not that big a deal. If you go too far, you can always release the tension. Be aware that these threads, because of the take-up of some of them, you're not going to have them exactly even down here. So try to get a really good eye on the ones that are the shortest, so that you don't start tying and then end up with one that you don't, that won't tie all the way. If you don't intend on using fringe, you can always take like a spare piece of sock yarn or something if you end up with one or two that are too short, and do an overhand knot onto the end of that with your the new yarn, this little scrap that you've got, and be able to tie on that way. So I'm going to go ahead and tie on just the same as I did it at the back, and we'll pick up at that point. One of my black threads had come off the side of my paper. So what I ended up doing, I just pulled some of this out. I released the tension on the back beam, and I just let this go. I pulled this out, let this go until I came back to where it was missing, and I got it back on its paper, and then just advanced the warp and did a little tugging, and advanced the warp and did a little tugging until I'm back to this. So if that ever happens to you, don't panic, but don't ignore it, because if it's off your paper, your tension will always be off the entire time. One of the other things I mentioned to you was the fact that your threads are going to be different lengths, and not to worry about it. One of the reasons is this is a cotton that it has very little give to it, very, very little give to it. This, however, was just simply an acrylic, and once I put tension on here to tie it on, I'm going to end up with yarns that are very, very similar in length. One of the things a tip that I thought of, sometimes people get panicked if this cord comes off and you don't know how to get it back on. I have a very easy way to do that. Just hold it out, fold the top back toward your thumb till you see the little butterfly. So fold it back till you see the little butterfly. Stick your finger or thumb through there, through this one and this one, the two wings, and you've got your knot. And then you can just slide your rod back on it. And that way people don't know how to undo it, and they'll come back onto here and they'll try to undo this, and it's not necessary. A different way to tie on, a way I'm going to show you how to tie on, instead of doing, you can perfectly do the one we had in the back where you put half of your bow here and the other half here and you tie your knot. You can do that. But since we have so many different types of thread and yarn, and they're so different lengths and different tension, this is another way to do it. And I already started doing this, but I'll show you on, I did one, but I'll show you on the other ones. Take about 2 inches worth, and this really is subjective, it doesn't matter, to whatever you're comfortable with. And try to get the tension pretty well the same on all of them. Now your ends are going to be different, but try to get the tension the same on all of them. And then look and see, where is my shortest piece? And it's right there. So I want to tie an overhand knot, and I'm just tying, I'm just going to tie an overhand knot for those of you that don't know what an overhand knot is. There you go. Pull all that through and try to pull all that through and try to come down as close to this as you can. And this is assuming you don't want fringe. So do that all the way down. Again, just make sure that you keep about the same amount of tension. You can kind of tug it from back there. Just try to keep the same tension. Find out where the shortest piece is. And tie your knot. And your knots will be, as you can see, my knots are pretty much the same. They're not perfect, but they're pretty much the same. And that's good enough. That's good enough for me. This one here, I may end up shortening up that a little bit. And I'll show you why here in a second. If you've got a little bit of wiggle room in them, go ahead and try to get them as close as you can. That's pretty good. Okay, now you're going to want to take a cord, a fairly strong cord, that is about 4 times the width of your loom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it was 4 before I tied all my knots on. So now what do? What you do with this is that you tie it on here pretty tight. You tie it on at one end, and then you're going to take these bouts and you're going to split them about in half, and you're going to run that through. And then you're going to go around this, the rod, and you're going to come up, and I like to go around twice. You don't have to, but I like to go around twice, and then take the next group, and come back down and go around. You take the next group. Okay, and tie just a temporary tie down here for right now. Okay, now you'll see that most of these are going to be able to be pretty much even in tension, because you can adjust these wraps to be able to maneuver your different tensions. Now I notice that I have a few that that I think are probably too long. They need to be, I need to up the knot, like this one here. So I'm gonna tie that knot a little tighter. This is not necessary, but it just it just helps me a little bit. Okay, so now you've got all of these tied on. Now what we can do is loosen this and hang on to the end, and your rod. And then we're going to advance this a little bit, and we're going to adjust these so that the tension is even all the way across. So if I needed to let this out some to make it even with this, I could. That way I can have this tied on and have the tension be the same, whereas in the typical way of doing it, this would not have been able to have been tied at the same tension this far away as this one, because they're different lengths. This way your cording accommodates for the different lengths of your bouts. So I can move this. If I needed more down here, I could just move this and make it adjustable. These will move. If I have one that's too loose, then I just simply tighten up all the way down. Till I get to the end. And then I can tighten it. So I just need to make sure that these are about the same tension. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then when I get done, when I feel that it's pretty much even all the way across, and it doesn't have to be uber tight, just even, just like it was at the back. When I feel like I've gotten all that done, then I'm going to go ahead and tie a permanent knot down on this side, and I'm okay to start advancing it and putting in, whether you're using wood, cardboard, scraps of material, whatever you're going to do to try to get your warp ends all evenly distributed. And we will pick it back up there later. And this one should be like the way this is your tension that you're going to start with. So kind of make that tight, and then hold on to this and pull on this one, hold on to this, pull on this one, hold on to this, pull on that one. So you're going to like keep the tension on this the same each time, and pull on this next bout in line to make that tense all the way down. Now you don't need to have it right up against here. This could also be clear up here, and these could be like going way up. But you just want to keep the tension pretty even all the way down till you get to here. Double check it again. See if the tension's pretty, oh there, this one seems loose to me. So I'm going to go back to this one, and I'm going to pull a little bit more. Tighten it a little bit. Tighten this. Tighten that. And tighten this. Okay, that seems pretty well. So what I'm going to do then is go ahead and loosen my temp tie, and I'm going to go ahead and tie this in a any kind of knot you want to tie it to make sure that it's going to stay tense. Because if you lose this, then all of your tension is going to go out the window. So just tie it however you want to tie it. There's no special tie here. I tie it kind of where I know I can take it apart later on, because I'm going to want to put a different warp on it at a different time. So now you're on. You can start advancing. You can start putting in your filler to try to draw everything up even in line where it should be.